My name is Sashi. I'm a bilingual health educator at Ishar. And today I'll be facilitating the single mothers and mental health in CaLD communities. I would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which we are meeting today. I'd like to pay my respect to the Lunga's elders, past and present. Our first speaker for this morning is Ishar Nancy Novakovic. Ishar is half Indonesian Yugoslav, born in Indonesia, and came to Australia when she was 6 weeks old. Ishar is a creative and cultural diversity consultant and social and law. She founded Modest Fashion Australia, MFA, and Secret Sky, supporting modest fashion designers worldwide. A co-founder of Global Bridges. Previously, she chaired Roots TV and served on various boards. And now, please welcome Ishar Nancy Novakovic for her presentation.
So thank you for that introduction. My name is Ishar Novakovic, and the topic today we're covering striving for balance, single mothers and mental health in CaLD communities. So I'll be speaking for about 20 minutes. Now, this is quite an unusual topic, firstly, and it really shouldn't be, because it is so common to find a lot of single mothers in our society, and it is only increasing. Either you're sitting here today as a single mother, or you work with single mothers, or you know lots of single mothers and single fathers as well. Obviously, it's an equation and it happens. So I want to cover a few topics, but firstly, okay, let me just put this out. These are my two sons. Obviously, I'm a mother, a single mother, and I have been for about 16 years. It's a long time. Just come back from Indonesia. What do you think one of the biggest questions was put to me? Are you going to get remarried? If you're from a diverse community, that's not uncommon. And I've had many conversations, interesting conversations with uncles and aunts and family members and just curious visitors about, why are you a single mum? Isn't it difficult? And I said, oh, it's different in Australia. Really? That's interesting. How so? It's different and it's similar. Similar issues, and there are, look, I always say there are pros, there are cons. Okay, and so in this space, you really have to withhold your judgment. And sometimes people are just not going to understand me, not going to understand you, and that's okay. Okay, because you've got to be practical. There are kids to look after, parents to care for, food to put on the table. Okay, so I've been a single mum since 2008. It started when I was 7 months pregnant with my second son. This is an old photo, by the way, from about, 2 years ago, but they've just shot up. So this was a photo shoot for Marie Claire about single mums, actually, and being a single mum. So I thought it was very appropriate. So I got married when I was very young. I was 19 years old. In my community, actually, at the time, that wasn't considered very young. That was considered quite normal. And my husband and I, we were the same age. I mentioned that because that was actually an important factor. I was ready to step up and be mature and be responsible for the children. He was not, for many reasons. We had gone to the same high school. You know, we knew each other very well. We knew each other's families. We were both 20 years old when we had our first child, Jibril. And it became quite obvious within the first 6 months that he wasn't coping very well. Well, neither was I wasn't coping very well either. But what that meant was that he became quite abusive. So the first incidents of domestic violence took place when I was 6 months pregnant with my first child, and basically threw me out of the car. And that was a big shock to me and to his family, in actual fact. So that really started about 4.5 years of domestic violence and the cycle of abuse, which at the time, I didn't know it was called the cycle of abuse until after I got divorced. Isn't that interesting? Because while you're in it, you have absolutely no idea what's going on. You're stuck in this cycle, trying to survive, and you have no explanation. You actually think you're just going crazy. Okay? So I think a lot of women in the audience can relate to that, unfortunately, but that was just the reality. And then after the divorce, I needed to come to terms with that chapter in my life, so I did my own research. I went to counselling, all that kind of thing, read some books. The one that really changed it around for me was the one by Lundy Bancroft. Why does he do that? Inside the minds of angry and controlling men. And I literally felt like he was talking to me. I'm getting goosebumps at the moment because it was that moment where I felt, oh my gosh, someone finally gets me. I'm not going crazy. Okay? Because it's a really lonely place. At the time, a lot of my family and friends had no idea because I always felt, you know what, we'll get through this. We've got a family together. My father died when I was 4 years old, and I didn't have the benefit of a father growing up. I didn't want to take that opportunity away from my sons. So I found myself divorced at the ripe old age of 24. Okay? I'm pregnant, I've just gone back to uni to finish off my bachelor's. That was one of the reasons why he divorced me, by the way, because suddenly I was too busy. Then I gave birth, and then I had to go straight back to uni, okay? And I was obviously and understandably beset by many insecurities and fears around how I was going to survive and just pay the rent. Now, before I got married and had my children, I was a very dynamic, active youth leader, very strong. But domestic violence means it works in a very insidious way. It kind of chips away at you. It's like the death by 1,000 cuts, right? You just wake up one day, 2 years down the track, you think you're okay, you wake up and just go, who am I? Where am I? What has happened to that really strong, ballsy woman who was ambitious and driven, and now she's literally under the foot of a man who is abusing her, okay? So the process of, being a single mum and then looking after 2 babies and then having to rebuild your sense of self was a very tough one. And part of that process for me was going back to uni and finishing off what I started, which was my bachelor's, and then doing my honours, and then going on to do law, which was a whole other chapter in and of itself, maybe for another day and another talk. But I'm standing here today sharing this with you thinking, wow, back then I really was quite scared about my own capabilities in paying the rent and taking care of the bills, and I almost laugh because I think I don't recognise that woman anymore, and I think that's a very good thing. But never forget where you came from. That's what I say. Learn the lessons. Well, here I am sharing some of the lessons. Okay, so these were some of the questions I had during that time. How would I finish my uni studies and honours with a newborn that I was breastfeeding? I was literally taking my 2-month-old son to uni with me, plonking him in the on-campus childcare facility, running in a tutorial, pretending I had read the material, and trying my best to sound intellectual, knowing that my son had woken up 7 times that night, puked on me twice, and I had 3 hours of sleep. And I should maintain a 70% average so I can qualify for my honours. That's a big ask for anyone. And then I'm sitting there in class, listening to a 22-year-old something, going, I'm so tired. You have no idea. You have no idea. I've not slept in 3 years. Okay, so what I'm saying is just your level of tiredness, I've never recovered, okay? I've never recovered. I now consider it my superpower, the fact that I don't need to sleep. 5 weeks in Indonesia, I've got a 15-year-old who's an athlete, a national athlete in Taekwondo, and a 19-year-old, and they're like, oh, Mum, I'm so tired. I'm like, get over it, please. All right, we're in Indonesia, get on with it. Okay, so anyway, that's just something you pick up when you're a single mum. It's a resilience factor. Okay, so now I'm thinking I've got, a child I'm breastfeeding, the 4-year-old, he also wants attention too. Okay, how do you split yourself? If you're a person who really is quite traditional, I'm a very traditional mum. I'm not afraid to say that. That's just the way that I am. I like to be at home with my kids. I also like to be out and work. But at the same time, I felt a lot of mother's guilt. I think as a single mum, it never really ends. And we tell ourselves, don't feel guilty, this is life. Sometimes we just can't help ourselves. You learn to deal with it a lot better as they grow older because there's a lot of forgiveness you've got to have for yourself, and your kids eventually understand. Now, family support was a big factor. It was quite limited because my mother has a disability, and I'm the eldest of 4 daughters, so I was expected to really be the one to always take care of my mum, and for me that's an honour and a privilege. But it's also quite a big ask. But when you come from communities which are collectivist, it's not about the individual, it's a duty. You need to adopt that, and I think that's something that should be borne in mind when working with multicultural communities, that it really is inherent, it's part of our genetic makeup. Okay, so let's just say that my 20s and probably my early 30s, for the most part, I felt pretty hopeless. I constantly questioned myself as to, what am I doing? People are saying, oh, wouldn't it be easy to just got remarried? And I was laughing. I thought, it depends who you're marrying, really. If you get a good one, maybe, or maybe that's another child. We don't have too many men in the room, okay? Because I'm not going to apologise, because you also know it's true. But at least there might be a bit of extra money coming in. That doesn't go astray. Sometimes just another user, but anyway, let's not dwell on that point. That's another topic for another day. Hence, I've been single for 16 years and counting. Anyway, okay. 3 big challenges for today: self-belief and confidence, mental health and self-care, financial and legal. All right. So, self-belief and confidence. When you're a single mom and you're blamed for all of society's ills, your kids have got ADHD on the spectrum, that's your fault because you're a single mom, right? A tsunami happened in Indonesia, that's your fault because you're a single mom. All right, we are basically at the bottom of the barrel in society. Okay? But we have a little secret superpower. We're very resilient and we're very adaptable. We have to be. And also, we're not afraid to be alone. I'm not saying that don't ever re-partner. If you find a beautiful partnership, that's a great blessing as well. It's a sense of having someone in your life. It's very natural. But there are special challenges that come along with re-partnering when you have children. There are risks. There are benefits, there are risks. Everyone has to make up their own mind. But I chose to go a different route, okay? I got through those dark days because I did have a sense of community. I had a great support network. I always tell people, maybe I wasn't born a millionaire, but I was made rich in many other ways. I was blessed with wonderful mentors through my schooling years, and also I was active in the community and many NGOs and not-for-profits, and that helped me keep my sanity and my wits about me, because it's flexible. It's not like going to a 9 to 5. There are responsibilities you owe the organisation, but you kind of have that space to be a mum and to be there for your children as well. And the volunteering aspect is really, really good. So that's something I would definitely encourage clients, if you're a single mum, to do that. Nothing heavy going, but that sense of friendship and connection. So that support network and support services for both mother and children. I accessed whatever I could access. There's no shame in asking for help, okay? I'm a person, I don't like to ask for help from anyone. But I was taught that that is not a sign of weakness, that is a sign of strength. Now, I did access a lot of counselling services, but it takes a bit of shopping around sometimes before you find someone you can connect with. And they are more valuable than gold. And I did find a few of those kinds of practitioners, but I'll be very honest with you, I was also quite disappointed. And you're allowed to feel disappointed, because if you're not connecting with the counsellor, you shouldn't feel obligated. Don't be afraid to go and find someone who's going to be there for you for the long term. Just join. You want to join that one?
Yep.
Okay. Thank you. Okay. So I don't know what you want to do there, but I'll just go on to my next few points. Now, education for me was a lifesaver. So you heard me mention that I finished my bachelor's, so I did an undergrad majoring in political science, international relations, and English. And then I went on to do honours with cognate in critical feminist literature. And then I went straight into a law degree. Okay, so that's a big topic. I don't want to dwell on it for too long, but suffice it to say for now that if I were to do it all over again, I might make slightly different decisions, because taking on a degree like law was more than full-time and incredibly stressful, and I felt like I was studying for 8 years. That's pretty much all of my children's childhood. So I think at that time I justified it as, well, this is for the future, this is for, the career for the kids. But remember who you're talking to. Are you convincing yourself, or is that what your kids want? Again, I don't want to dwell on it for too long, but it's something I don't regret, but it was a sacrifice everyone had to pay in the family, most especially my children. In actual fact, I'm not formally working as a lawyer at the moment because I went straight into full-time caring for my mum. What I'm saying is that the education piece is important. It made me feel really empowered, but there's plenty of time for that. One of the key things that I learned, and I'm skipping across to the lessons, is that, and this is generally how I feel, there's always time to make money, but you have a limited amount of time with your family. So it depends on what you want, I would have done things very differently. So education is both formal and informal. I did a lot of personal development, that sort of thing. And a lot of these youth leadership programs and community leadership programs, a lot of them are free or low cost. And it worked wonders for me because it's about putting some belief back into yourself and that confidence. Financial literacy, very important. Like I said at the beginning, didn't know I was going to pay the bills. Financial literacy is something a lot of people don't possess. We're not talking about becoming a billion-dollar investor. It's about how to manage your finances in your household, which a lot of people don't know whether they're single parents or not, okay? But when you are a single mother, you have to learn how to be very resourceful, how to make $1 equal $100 or more, okay? It's a muscle that a lot of people don't know how to work. I have that skill, and I'm very grateful. It's learned through very tough times, but it just means, you know, economically, when you do have a lot more money, you know how to get more value out of it. Now, what a great blessing is that, right? There's also the balancing caring responsibilities with work. A lot of the cultural pressures are like, you're never enough, whether you're at work or whether you're at home. In actual fact, I used to go to work in a part-time job at UWA, where I was studying at the same time. I used to breathe a sigh of relief when I was at work. I said, oh, finally a break. I felt the real work was at home. That's why I went to work. The income was just a bonus, really. Navigating Centrelink can be a minefield, especially for the first time, and then you learn to find your way. And there's a lot of shame as well for a lot of women who might think, well, you know, am I really entitled to this? I'm like, well, you are, because one day you're going to pay it back. You're raising the next generation, okay? We are very active members of this society, and Centrelink is there if you're eligible for it. There's no shame in getting your entitlements. Whilst looking for work, I think there's a lot of, who was it that said it best? Kanye West. I ain't saying she's a gold digger. Well, you know, a lot of men think, well, we're not going to pay her child support because of this. No, I used to get that a lot, actually. I said, well, if you know the cost of living and taking care of a child, you never say that. That's just some sheer ignorance. Advocating for your rights at work. There's a lot of research and studies that say that men are really great at negotiating their pay and women generally are not. But that again comes down to your level of confidence in building your relationships at work and understanding what you're entitled to and your own self-worth. Comes back to that problem. If you don't know your value as a woman, it's really hard to advocate for yourself. Starting a business, that might actually work better for you as a single mum. That's actually what I did. So I founded a company, Modest Fashion Australia, and also another business, a cultural consultancy business. I found that just saw me through the COVID times, and that's really worked much more flexibly for me, because what it meant is I worked my business around my family life, not the other way around. Another consideration to have, particularly from a practitioner's point of view, is often women from multicultural and diverse communities have a lot of overseas family as well, which means that they're regularly sending money overseas. So you might wonder, why don't I have enough money to pay the bills? It's because if you've just left a developing country beset by war, and you know your family's still stuck in a refugee camp, in relative terms, you're still doing a lot better. So it's that level of having that cognizance and that awareness internationally about what's happening. Okay, finally, legal. It's a big topic. I'm from the legal profession, so obviously this is my bread and butter. Divorce is a big one. If you have complex cases, I always recommend a good lawyer, okay? But it does put a lot of pressure, particularly on women who've suffered a lot of domestic violence. There's already an imbalance of power. But what I can tell you very quickly is that the law does afford women a lot of rights under the Family Law Act, okay? Navigating the family court system, it's a terrible place to be. If anyone's experienced it, it's a minefield. Very, very stressful, always a dark cloud hanging over your head, particularly if you're stuck in the system for a number of years. I was stuck in the family court system for 9.5 years, okay? So what that does to you mentally, to your stress levels, your cortisol levels, how that impacts on the children, the trauma, re-traumatization, it's all very real. Shared parental responsibilities and visitation. It's a real source of stress. Thankfully, I've gotten to the point with my ex-husband where we're actually on very good terms. Again, another topic for another time. A lot of forgiveness, moving on. He's in the children's lives. They didn't want him to be in their lives for a while, but they wanted to forgive. Clearly, as you know, I'm a Muslim. I'm very blessed to be very strongly connected to my faith, and that's been a real bedrock as well, okay, for healing and spiritual growth. Children can be very forgiving, and you just have to, maintain that hope that you can reunite the family time and time again, despite the obstacles. The single mother paradigm is unique, so don't compare yourself to anyone else's family life. You don't need to scroll through social media and say, why couldn't I have that? It's your pathway for a reason. Embrace it. Don't compare yourself. Whatever they project on social media, that's the best representation. You don't know what's happening behind closed doors. Be there for the children. Remember, the focus is them. The legal system will tell you the same thing. It's very child-centered, in the child's best interests. I'm not advocating being a martyr. That doesn't serve anyone. It doesn't serve you, doesn't serve them. But it will give you a lot more patience when you look at them and they test you. Trust that they will appreciate you later. My kids, I took them to Indonesia after 10 years. We were delayed going back because of COVID and whatnot. They've grown up in Australia, connected back with family. Second day, my son said, this is what family feels like. Comes back, he came back yesterday, slept in, I said, how did you feel sleeping? He goes, Mum, I feel lonely, I miss the family, the culture, the language, the food of Indonesia, the time we had bonding. It's been a long time coming, but it's amazing how it feels just like a big reset that everyone just needed. And there are so many opportunities like that in life. Yes, often my kids said, we don't need this, we don't need that, you're always busy, Mum, we just want you. And sometimes that was the hardest thing for me to give to them. Last but not least, be kind to yourself. You're one woman, you're human, you also have needs as well. Healing and forgiveness, that will go a long way. You've got to fill your cup first before you can give it to your children or anyone else. And with that, I'll see you later. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Ishar. Thank you for sharing your presentation with us. And we'll have an opportunity later on to answer your questions. Our next speaker is Sama Mawar. Sama is a counselor and creative arts therapist and a registered member of the Professional Association for Creative Art Therapists in Australia, New Zealand, and Asia. She's graduated with a master's degree in creative arts therapies from Modern University in Perth. She has experiences working with individuals and group therapy. She follows a culturally responsive, trauma-informed, and person-centered approach using art of therapeutic, non-artistic purposes. Her interests include working with women from a multicultural background who experience or are experiencing family domestic violence. She also works with youth and adults with grief, anxiety, self-esteem, and other psychological difficulties. Please welcome our very own Sama Mawar.
So just before I start, I have two notes. If something that I might say might be triggering, or you might feel like you're getting emotional, we have Rehab, our manager. You can actually go to her and she can assist you. Maybe go outside, go for a walk, talk to someone. Next thing is I'm just aware of the time, so I think I have maybe more, lots of information on my slides. I might not go through all of them, but if you feel like there's a point that I didn't cover in my presentation, then we have the 30 minutes for questions later, and then you can ask me about that. Okay, so I'm the counselor and at Ishar, and I will be covering the technical aspect of working with single moms from a CaLD background. So before we start talking about the work, we need to understand where is the single mother coming from. So just like a general, simple introduction or definition of what culture is, and it's basically the values and behaviors shared by a group or individuals. And it's more than just ethnic and racial heritage. It includes factors like age, gender, sexual orientation, socioeconomic status, and physical and mental abilities. So, and we have types of cultures as well. We have the collectivist culture and we have the individualistic culture. Mainly the CaLD communities go into the collectivist culture because it's like belonging to a group, belonging to a community. Whereas in the individualistic culture, it's more the focus on the person. There's lots of conformity in the collectivist culture, and that means changing your own behavior to actually fit in the culture and to be accepted by the community. And one type of conformity is compliance. So even though you don't agree with what's happening internally, but you still have to conform to that. And that can be an example of domestic violence, for example. Knowing that it's not okay what you're going through, but if you actually say something, then you might lose so many things that we're gonna go through, and Aisha definitely talked about that. Even the way we describe ourselves in our communities, we use words and roles like I'm a good mother, or I'm a good daughter, or I'm a good friend. But in the individualistic culture, it's more of what the person feels like and think of themselves. So I'm kind, I'm athletic, I'm smart, I'm competent. Yeah? So what happens when a mom becomes a single mom? Whether she likes it or not, whether she was happy in her culture or not, whether she was going through domestic violence, which makes it harder for her to be happy in her culture or not, then in a way she is shifting from being in a collectivist culture to an individualistic one. That's a very hard word that I have to repeat so many times. God. Okay. So some of the consequences that I'm going to go through really quick are actually feeling isolated, with lack of support. There's cultural adjustment going from one culture to the other. There's the parenting style expectations as well. Like, how do I raise my kids? Do I raise them according to my culture? Or maybe they are born here. Do I raise them more as like in the Australian way of living, for example? So there, and then there's there's that layer of, am I gonna disappoint my family if I'm raising them this way or that way? And then there's the limited access to service, and that can be linked to maybe language barrier or lack of education. Because she wouldn't, like when, for example, when Aisha went into her marriage, she was not like, oh, I need to know what family law is about or like what services are about, because she went into that marriage thinking that this is what she wants to do. She wants this to work. And then obviously the legal and the immigration issues and family court and the financial strains. So if you want to go back to this slide, we're basically asking a single mom to go from feeling and being socially interdependent, connected, obedient, and self-sacrificing, whether she wants it or not, whether she likes it or not, to being independent, self-reliant, assertive, and pleasure-seeking. And God forbid women from a culture, from CaLD background actually think of pleasure-seeking, because that's really selfish, right? So we're actually expecting her to become this, while if she went through domestic violence, if she was like this, she would have lost it, or she would have thought, oh wait, am I going crazy? No self-confidence, no self-esteem whatsoever to be able to become all these things again. So it's like she needs to retrain herself while having to go through family court and immigration and financial strength. And with this comes obviously mental health issues. So the most presenting issues that we encounter in counseling are loneliness, because maybe they are feeling like they don't belong to their community anymore because they're shamed for taking the decision to leave. Depression and anxiety. There's even postnatal depression. If you just gave birth and then you became a single mom, that's another layer of depression that you have to deal with. And then there's low self-confidence and self-esteem. There's the absence of sense of self. Am I going crazy? I don't know what I want. I don't know how I feel. I don't know what I need. Stress, parent-child relationship difficulties, and the physical health implications, because there's lots of research about how if the mind and the body are working together in a healthy way, then your quality of life and your well-being would be positively affected. So the more stressed you are, the more this is going to affect your sleep, maybe, the more it's going to affect your physical health. So it becomes like a cycle. So what does the client usually bring to the session before we even start? So there's like normalizing family, FDV, domestic violence. So maybe my client would be like, my mother-in-law told me it's normal, just go say sorry and forget about it. It's your duty as a mom or as a wife to just suffer or like be okay with everything. There's a lot of shame. The fact that she was maybe able to take a decision to leave, then she would be accused of destroying her marriage, destroying her life, destroying the whole family system even. And how is she going to be able to raise the children alone? They need a father, regardless of that how bad this relationship is. It's always better to keep things in the family and make it work no matter what. And then she starts self-blaming and feeling guilty because she took away that from her children when she's raising them. There's no father figure, maybe. And then there's a lot of stigma around mental health, and especially with CaLD communities, it's not okay sometimes to not feel mentally okay or prepared for everything that is happening to you. And when she comes, she's literally in survival mode. So maybe for her, even mental health is not something that she wants to focus on. She's more worried about how to put food on the table because now she's alone. She went from being a housewife to now needing to work maybe to be able to afford that. So, and I get that a lot because I have clients who are sent to counseling without them asking for it, maybe by doctors or service providers, just because the service provider or the doctor thought that she needs it. And then she's in my session and she's not even aware why she's there. And for me, like her mental health is not her priority and I need to respect that. I can guide her, I can give her awareness of it would be a good idea if you want to manage both because you can actually build the strength to be able to go through the court or find a job, etc., or refer her. But I'm not going to force her to just stay in the sessions if she's not the one who decided to be there. And then there's the loss of identity and role. So she went from being a mom, a daughter, a friend, a sister, and then a housewife, and then a daughter-in-law, and then a mother, to literally just being a mother without having that sense of self and that identity of I'm a woman or I'm an individual before anything else, because she didn't have the time or the space to be able to practice that. So when we have clients who comes from a CaLD background, it's very important to adopt an intersectional approach. Why? Because it actually recognizes and addresses the multiple layers of identity, privilege, and marginalization that the client may experience. And it actually acknowledges how the well-being of my client is affected by a combination of factors, such as her gender, her ethnicity, her own culture, and the socioeconomic status, and other things. It is holistic because it actually covers the physical, emotional, and mental aspects of the client. So let's say a client comes to Ishar, for example. She's able to see a doctor, a nurse, a midwife, a social worker, a counselor, a psychologist, even admin, even a lawyer sometimes. So she feels that she's actually surrounded, and she feels like home in a way. And it's very important to actually address the intersection of motherhood and gender, because this actually recognizes and explores the identity of that woman in that culture, and how now being a single mom is actually intersecting with that. And it might actually affect her self-perception, and then her self-esteem, and then stress level gets higher, and then her overall mental health will get worse. And what's good in the intersectional approach, all hard words by the way, intersectional, collectivist, and like, yeah. So it's actually tailored to the client, taking in consideration their culture, because we can actually harm a client if we're making them fit in a theory to work on. And it's very important for the counselor or the service provider to put the effective multicultural hat. And when we talk about that, it's actually an ethical obligation when we have a client coming in from a multicultural background to develop sensitivity to cultural differences, to be able to provide the adequate support. And then we are in constant challenge, we constantly challenge the idea that our values and our biases are automatically true to the client. And then there's the therapist-client relationship, and Aisha mentioned a bit about that, how you're not obligated to stay there. And when a single mom comes from a CaLD background, comes to the session, how she was being treated, she might think that there would be a hierarchy in the session, which is not true. So it's an equal partnership, and this is where her self-confidence and decision-making can be actually practiced again, to be able to take that outside of the therapy room. So for her to know that she's the equal partner, she's the owner of everything that is happening in the session, whether it's how much she wants to stay in the session, when she needs to leave the session, what goals is she gonna work on, this is where she can actually feel like, oh, okay, I have a say. I have a say in something. And then it has to be person-centered approach, so dealing with trusting the client and what they want, dealing with them with empathy, non-judgment, and unconditional positive regards, and definitely maintain their dignity, just like the example I gave about having clients sent when they don't want to be there. And obviously it has to be trauma-informed, because this is how our work is going to be affected, by knowing how trauma, which it can be war or famine or asylum seeking, how it actually contributed to all the other mental health issues that brought this client to us. So the main goals of individual therapy would be definitely working on building a sense of self, self-confidence, self-worth. It's even about reminding the client about her strength, resilience, adaptability, because she would definitely not, when she's in an abusive environment, she would be definitely forgetting about her own strength. So therapy would be a good reminder for her, a good place for her to remind her of her strength. And in some cases, we actually work on not just exploring her support system, but we may have to create one from scratch, because she might be abandoned by her whole community, and she has to actually start creating her support system again, because at the end of the day, as much as you can do by yourself, you would need other people, other support. Even if your family, for example, is in Indonesia, they're not here, it's not the same as having someone in the same country with you. And one very important point is creating boundaries, because we don't have something called boundaries in CaLD communities. Like it doesn't exist. What is a boundary? You know, like even when you're educated, and like I'm talking about myself, like it's like a foreign concept. So to be able to create that, especially when dealing with stigma and shame from other people in the community, you can actually limit contact with these people by creating those boundaries and choose who you talk to and who you don't talk to anymore. And the most important thing that can actually influence all the above is promoting agency. So agency is the technical term of the feeling of actually taking over your life and being in charge of your life, which is something that she may have not had for her, like her entire life. So what kind of approaches do we use? It can be a combination of all of these at the same time, yeah? So definitely psychoeducation about what boundaries are, what they look like, and lots of psychoeducation about self-care and how this is not called selfish. Because when a single mom from a CaLD background comes to the session and I'm like, what are you doing for yourself? She's like, oh, I can't, it's selfish, I've never thought about myself. If I put myself first, that's really selfish. It means maybe I don't love my kids enough. So there's a big difference between what selfishness is and self-care. And I always give the example of when you're on an airplane, like the most common example of if you don't put your mask first, if the train is going down, then you're not going to be able to put your if you put the mask to the person who is next to you before you put it on yours, then you might not be able to put it on yourself. So it's always better to protect yourself first to be able to support the other person. In that way, if you are not taking care of yourself physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, you're not going to be able to be present for your kids the way you want to be present. Strength-based approach, which means, again, reconnecting her with her strength. Creative arts therapies, and I'm going to go a bit in detail in that after. CBT, and I'll go in, which is cognitive behavioral therapy. And then mindfulness-based cognitive therapy that actually works on exploring and learning to be self-compassionate. And it's not just with the feelings, it's with your thoughts as well. And there's like this formulation or this equation where the more you're suffering, the more you need to be compassionate towards yourself. So it's like 2 cups. If you're pouring in the suffering cup, you have to equally pour in the self-compassion cup. And there's narrative therapy, so basically reframing her story. What happened to you is not something that you need to forget about, it's part of your story. This is what made you who you are now. This is why you're resilient. It's just the way you need to reformulate that story, to own it and be proud of it. Definitely a big goal is addressing stigma and stereotypes, and it starts with the space that we're providing. So I have lots of clients who are even worried about the interpreter being in the room, being from the same community, because they might feel judged by them. And even me, maybe as like someone who's speaking Arabic, maybe I might, and I'm not sure if it happened or not, but I might feel like clients from my like Arabic culture might feel a bit like they might take their time to trust me. Normalizing the experience and showing her that it's non-judgmental, this is someone else has gone through the same thing, and this is what the outcomes were. And then supporting her to distinguish between her own values and personal choices and her culture, because she might be like, I still want to be connected to my culture, but not entirely. Some things I agree with, but some things I don't agree with anymore. Reframing the negative thoughts and self-doubt into more positive self-affirmation, and this is something we do using cognitive behavior therapy. And cultural pride, obviously. We need her to feel that there's a sense of belonging. It's not like she needs to be completely detached from her culture. And role models. Maybe talk about role models that are from the same community, who have gone through the same thing and where they are now. And as I mentioned, setting the boundaries with the people who are making her feel shamed or judged. So, agency is one of the main goals, and it actually covers being in charge of your life, starting to be okay with that idea, knowing that you have a say in what happens to you, unlike how it used to happen before, maybe when you were married, knowing where you stand, and knowing that you have some ability to shape your circumstances. But it's not that straightforward, obviously. Because when you think that you are going crazy or you don't know what's happening to you, you will not be able to know where you stand or what outcomes you can, what ability you have to shape your circumstances. So it all starts internally. So interoception is the awareness of our subtle sensory and the body-based feelings. So when a woman is going crazy, she doesn't have trust in the world, she doesn't even trust herself. So what we focus on more is how she's feeling in her body, because that's the only place that you can actually trust. Your body always tells you the truth. Whether you're feeling anxious or stressed or sad or happy, if you don't know what's happening, always go back to your body, and that's something that I keep repeating in the sessions. So when you know what you're feeling in your body and you are able to label it, you will know why you're feeling this way. And when you know the why, then you will be able to actually know, okay, so this is what's happening internally and this is what's happening outside in the environment, and this is how I can deal with it. So it all starts from the body, basically. And this is where creative arts therapies comes in, because we always involve the body in creative arts therapies and expressive arts therapies. I always start the session with, how are you feeling in your body? Be more specific. If she says, I'm feeling tired, where are you feeling tired in your body? I'm feeling it in my chest. Okay, how does it feel in your chest? It's feeling a bit heavy. Does it have a color? Does it have a noise? Does it have a smell? So the more information, the more she is present with her body. And then at the end of the session, we check in again. I think I'm feeling a bit lighter. And then we check in why she's feeling a bit lighter in her chest, because maybe there's a new feeling that is added that could be confidence. Maybe I'm feeling more confident in myself. Okay, how does confidence feel in your body? It's feeling like a nice light inside. Okay, what color is it? Does it have a sound? And then we keep checking in with that, because this is where, we're always bringing it back to her. Decision making and agency start in creative arts, because even the smallest decisions in her life she couldn't take when she was married or she was in an abusive relationship. So the fact that she is able to choose the art modality that she wants to work with in creative arts, that's her actually practicing decision making. And it might sound silly, but it's not. Yeah? So if a client comes, she's like, I don't know what I want. I don't know what art modality I want, because I don't know what I like. And then if I'm always there giving what she needs to do, then I'm not helping in any way. So the first step would be to actually, maybe the first few sessions would be for her to actually choose the art modality that she wants to work with. And sometimes, using art can be a bridge to your home country. Like if you're listening to your music that reminds you of home, or a special place or a safe space that you can go to. This is like a bridge to your own home country, and you don't have to feel that lonely and that isolated, at least in your body as well. And then CBT. Why is CBT important? Because there's a client therapist partnership. So, and it's culturally sensitive, because it actually uses the individual's belief systems and worldview as the method of self-exploration. So it's definitely culturally sensitive. And the client, again, is actively involved. So it actually promotes self-confidence and self-esteem and decision-making and agency. And the interventions are tailored to the need and the strength of the client. This is an example of what we can use in CBT about what we can control and what we can't control. And this is a good exercise to deal with the shame and the stigma around people from the community who are judging you. So we have the small circle is the circle of control, and this is what we actually are in control of. And the blue circle is the circle of influence. We have indirect control of, and this is where the work is, setting boundaries with the people who I don't want to deal with because they affect my mental health or they affect my thoughts and my reactions. And then there's the circle of concern, the last one that we don't have any control over. like world peace, or where was I born, or like the traffic, or anything else. So we do this together in the session, and it can be for one thought, or it can be for like a general attitude that she wants to work on. So I'm almost done. Other than the individual sessions, obviously support and being connected is a very important aspect of working with single moms. And the goals of the sessions would be providing support, so being in the same room as other people who have gone through the same thing can be very empowering. And it's about social connectedness more than just social connections, like the surface level of social connections. It's deeper than that. And then it's about strength, so honoring other people in the group that they have, that they succeeded, or this is the challenge that they've gone through and this is where they are now. And then blind spots. So maybe I'm coming with this idea of nothing is working for me, but when I share it with the group, someone in the group that might be like, but this is what you're doing different. Maybe it would be maybe this is working, but do something different this way. So just getting another opinion. I'm going to show you just an example of something we do using creative art. So the task was to draw yourself climbing a mountain alone. So I didn't talk about what the goal of the activity was before I started. Yeah. So just the task was draw yourself climbing a mountain alone. So the client drew this. It's like a 90-degree mountain, and she used words like, I'm so exhausted, I can't feel my legs, it's so slippery, I will never make it to the top. Okay? And then the next task was draw yourself climbing a mountain with another person. And that's the same client. So when she was talking about it, she was like, oh, it felt like one of the Sound of Music images. Like, it is hard, but I don't feel as tired. I don't feel as sad or stressed about the journey because about the destination. I'm just enjoying how I'm walking with that person. I'm enjoying my conversations with them. And this is basically, the goal was about building your support system and how important it is to actually have someone rather than going through things alone. So, yeah, I think that's it. Thank you so much.
Alright. So now we're having a break. Because of short time, we'll be having a 5 minutes break. Before that, I would like you all to give a big round of applause to Asha and Sama for helping women and inspiring women. Thank you.